It's February 14th, 2023. I'm feeling slick. I'm feeling smooth. Everything felt normal. And then it came. The strike that changed everything. Now this strike gave me a brain injury that affected my ability to speak. And I made it my mission to get my speech back to how it once was. But in the process, I discovered what makes these great public speakers so great. And I distilled it into 5 buckets. From the thousands of hours on YouTube, doing courses and public speaking myself, I realized all you need is these 5 buckets. And it's the Dials formula: delivery, improv, auditory, language, and storytelling. And in this video, I'm gonna go through one element from each bucket. Now, I made this formula for public speaking, but it correlates to everything. Because if you can implement this Dials formula in your normal day-to-day life, you can inspire people, you can persuade people, and you can also influence people just with your words. But before I get into the first element of bucket number 1, if you also want some free resources to help with your communication, there are some free links below. The top link is all about the Dials formula. The second one is about making an influential presentation. And the third one is if you get speaking anxiety and how to overcome it. They are totally free. Put your email in and I will send over all the information that you need. But let's get into the first one, which is delivery. Now, with your delivery, you need to think of it the same way as you build fitness. If you want to have a high output, you need to have a big base. The bigger the base, the higher the peak. So if we can make a really strong base down here, we are going to be able to communicate better when we are giving our speeches. And the way that you're going to create a big base so you can have a higher peak is by working on your core foundations. Your core foundations are articulation, volume, fillers, pace, pitch, pause, and tonality. They are the 7 core foundations to your communication. This will shape how you sound. Now, trying to work on all these at once is going to be very hard. It's just like when you go to the gym. When you're learning martial arts, if you try and work on your low kick, your body kick, your straights, your hooks, your wrestling, and your jiu-jitsu all at once when you've never done any sort of martial arts before, you're going to crash and burn. The way you are going to improve your core foundations is by picking one. You're going to pick one to work on each week, and eventually you will build a better base so then you can communicate in a better way when you're giving your public speeches. But how? How can you work on all these by doing the same exercise? Well, it's very simple. We're going to do the record, review, isolate, and repeat process to build a good base. You're going to record yourself to speak first. This could be speaking for 5 minutes on a topic that you are really interested in, but make it improv, because if you don't make it improv, you're going to drill the sentences in your head and the combinations of these sentences so you've already visualized what you're going to say. Then you're not bringing out your true communication skills. You are then going to review the footage. Now with this review, all I want you to do is pick one of these. So when you're watching yourself back, which is going to be very cringy at first, because when you hear yourself speak, you hear it through bone conduction and air conduction. But when you hear it on your phone, it is literally air conduction. So you might think, do I sound that way? Is that really me? It's just that you're hearing your voice from a different perspective. And after you've watched yourself back, you're going to think, am I going to work on my articulation, my volume, my fillers, my pace, my pitch, my pause, or my tonality? Pick one and only one. You start doing 2 or 3, it's going to be very hard to improve in that area. Pick the one that you are most self-conscious about. We're going to start with articulation just for this drill because that was one of my main issues with my brain injury. I would mumble and it'd be very hard to understand what I was saying. So after you've picked one from reviewing your footage, you are going to isolate your footage over here. But we want to make this simple because when I was coaching MMA, I learned one thing, that you can make it complicated if you want to make it complicated, or you can make it simple if you want to make it simple. The choice is yours. So instead of making this complicated and having loads of different tasks that you can do, the isolate task is going to be very simple. You're going to get a book, and with that book, you are going to read. And the reason that you're going to get a book, because it takes away the cognitive load. If you have to think of what to say and articulate it in a manner that is improvised, you're not going to be working on a core foundation. You're going to be working on your improvisation skills, not your delivery. So by reading a book, you don't have to think of what to say. You can just read the words on the paper. Pretty simple. And whilst you're reading that book, you are going to isolate that core foundation, which right now is articulation. For example, if you are reading a book and your aim is to articulate, you are going to overpronounce every single word that you say. So your mouth movements are being clear and you are overpronouncing the words. That is what you will do if you are articulating. You're working on your articulation. If it was volume, sometimes you'd read the book quietly and then you'll go even louder. And that is the drill for every single one. So once you isolate it and you've done that, you can then repeat the process and see if you've improved by recording yourself again and reviewing it after that to check, okay, for this one right now, did I articulate my words properly? Was there any syllables that I mumbled and I didn't pronounce them clearly? That is the process. I just use articulation as an example. You might not need that one. You might want to work on your volume, your fillers, your pace, your pitch, your pause, or your tonality. But it's by recording yourself, reviewing the process, picking one of these, and ideally pick one per week. Don't just do random ones every single day. Isolate the process by getting a book, reading it, focusing on that core foundation, and then repeating the process back to here again. That is the first core foundation. That's the first element from the delivery bucket to be a great communicator. So you can not only inspire, not only influence, but you can also persuade people that you speak to. And remember, if you want more free resources on this Dials formula, the free link is below. I will send you 30 more elements over 30 days going through each bucket. But let's go on to the next one. Improvisation, known as improv. Now, the main thing that I'm going to concentrate with improv is your ability to formulate a message. Because sometimes whilst you're public speaking, someone might ask you a question. And when they ask you a question, you need to formulate the answer in a succinct way which is easily understandable, so they can easily digest the message. Imagine if you just ramble on, ramble, and ramble. Like when Bob rambles on to me, I just want to fall asleep. I do not care what Bob has to say. But Jenny over here that says it in a succinct manner that gets her point across straight away, I love listening to Jenny because Jenny just tells me what I need to know and that's it. You need to get your communication like Jenny, in a structured way so people actually want to listen to you. The way you're going to do that is through frameworks. Now you might think frameworks, but let me take you to the MMA gym. You might have done some MMA before, you might not have, but when I first started, I was getting pretty smooth on the bag. I was getting pretty smooth hitting the pads. I was completely fine. I was in my flow. But when I had to hold the pads, that is when it got a bit hard. I didn't know what to say. Actually, let me get the pads so you've got a clearer picture. These are pads right here. So when you're a pad holder, you've got to hold for people throwing punches. And I didn't know what to hold. I didn't know what to call. So coach gave me a framework. And number 1 was holding it up for a jab. Number 2 was a jab, then a cross. Number 3 was a jab, cross, then a hook. Number 4 was a jab, cross, hook, cross. Now it was 4 combinations, but those 4 combinations gave me a guide of what to say when holding pads. It wasn't a lot, but it was a framework to help me not go blank. And it's the same with your communication. The whole reason that you have a framework is number 1, so you don't go blank, but number 2, so you don't ramble, so you say it in a succinct manner. And here's some examples of some frameworks that you can use. Number 1, PREP. PREP stands for point, reason, example, point. You're going to say your point. You're going to say a reason for that point, an example for the point, and then say the point again. Let's do an example. You need frameworks when you speak. The reason that you need this is you can say it in a succinct manner. An example of a framework is PREP. PREP allows you to have a guide of what to say whilst you are speaking. That is why you need frameworks. That is just a quick example of how to use the PREP framework. Another one could be then, now, how. Now that is a framework that you would use if you're trying to talk about a transformation with a client or you're trying to talk about a story. What happened in the past? Well, I used this same framework when I started this video. I talked about my brain injury. Now, I talked about how I got my speech back. And then how? I'm going through this Dials formula right now. That's just an example of a framework. So with your improv bucket, you want to get frameworks in your head that you can use when you speak. When someone asks you a question or you want to articulate your thoughts, think, what framework could I use to speak? Then speak with that structure. That moves me on to the next bucket, which is your auditory. And remember, the free links are in the description below. Someone is calling me right now. Who is that? Get out of here, get out of here. Auditory. With public speaking, this one isn't as important compared to conversations, but you can still use auditory in your public speeches for your benefit. And the way you're going to do this is by looking at the reactions. Because what do the reactions tell you? The reactions tell you if you said something funny, if you said something that people don't agree with, if you are engaging the audience. You can look when you're speaking and see, all right, are people looking engaged right now? Are people laughing? Are people looking at their phone? Are people daydreaming up there? Because Johnny over here might be on his phone scrolling through Instagram. But Jenny might be on the edge of her seat looking in and wanting to hear more from you. But from seeing the reactions, you can change your script for further presentations when you're doing them at work. For example, I did a speech at Toastmasters and it's all about how my mum set me some non-negotiables. I used a line in that speech that said this: Stafford, I can do more press-ups than you and your brother combined. Now that one line got loads of laughs and I did not expect it to get laughs. But with that feedback from using auditory skills, I used more of those dialogue lines in my next speech where my mum was taking the piss out of me and I got even more laughs. And it's only by listening to how your audience reacts right here that you can improve your presentations. However, if you're using your auditory bucket for conversations, it's all about listening to the other person and using what they've told you in later conversations so they know you are listening to them so they feel seen and understood. But that is a different element within the auditory bucket, which if you want more information on, check the first link below and I will send over that information over 30 days. But let's get on to the next one, which is language. With language, I'm going to talk about what you shouldn't do. Do not be a try hard. Now, if you watch Simon Sinek, Tony Robbins, or Vin Jan, there's one thing that they do that is very similar. They don't use complicated language. Because here's the thing, when you try to impress, you look like a tryhard. And when you look like a tryhard, you are not being yourself. The whole point with your language is to articulate in a manner which is unique to you. Which means if you're doing a presentation and you've scripted a word that you would never normally say, don't use it. Just use words that you would normally say in conversations. Because then you are being yourself. And if you are being a tryhard, you will never come across as yourself. Now, there's lots more that I could say on language, but that's the most important element. From watching all these communicators, they use words that they would do in conversation. None of them use these standout, complicated words that I have to go on Google to understand. Because you've got to think of it like this. If you're speaking and you're saying all these words that the audience does not understand, you're not benefiting them. And the reason you speak is for the audience. You don't speak for you. So if you're trying to make yourself look smart and look clever and look intelligent, but the audience doesn't understand what you are saying, it is pointless. Because they're going to walk away from that speech or that presentation that you give in the wrong way. Because you want them to think, feel, or do something after listening to you. If they can't understand the language that you have used, they're not going to be able to do that. And that's why it's very important to be yourself and not be a tryhard. And moving on to the last one, which is storytelling. And remember, the links are below for your free resources. Now, the great thing about storytelling is it gives your unique perspective. And the reason that is so important with public speaking and normal conversations and meetings is because it allows you to stand out. Imagine if you're looking into a field and you see 100 sheep, but there's this one sheep that has purple fur. Now, when you go home, you're now thinking of that purple sheep. Why did it have purple fur? But you're not thinking about the other 99 sheep that was in that field. Why? Because they didn't stand out. And when you, drop my pen, when you tell stories about your life, you will create a unique perspective to the audience, which will allow you to stand out. And it's only by using your experience to benefit the audience that you will do that. But one tip when you are giving your stories is to relive your stories. Do not retell your stories. And the way that you are going to do this is by including dialogue. Now, here is a great example from Darren Tay.
Hey, loser! How do you like your new school uniform? I think it looks great on you. Those were the words of my high school bully, Greg Umberfield.
Now, the reason using dialogue is so powerful is because it taps into the audience and transports them into that moment there and then. So it's not a thing of the past. It now feels like the audience is experiencing it in real time. And that is when you will truly connect. And that is the 5 buckets to be a great communicator. Now, I spent hours going through YouTube to figure this out. So now when I want to improve my communication, I no longer have to think about what to do. I just go into one bucket, either delivery, improv, auditory, language, or storytelling. And like I said at the start, to be a great communicator, that is all you need. These 5 buckets. And remember, in the link below is the free resources. You've got 3 links there. The top one is all about the Dials formula. The second one will be about an influential presentation, and the third one will be about how to conquer your speaking anxiety so it now becomes your secret weapon. Now, I've gone through the 5 buckets to be a great communicator, but there's one thing that can stop you from accessing these 5 buckets, and that is your nerves. If you can't control your nerves when you are speaking and you get so much anxiety giving a presentation at work, you will not be able to access these 5 buckets. So even if you do all this work, working on your communication, working on your delivery, your improv, your auditory, your language, and your storytelling, it won't matter if your anxiety takes over. And that's why you should probably watch this one, because that will help with that. Anyway, that is me. I am gonna go get a protein shake and go by the beach, do some work. And I'm in Thailand, so I might as well get a nice little £5 massage. But anyway, adios.